Heya! My name is Alex Bracey, and I am a student at Bloomsburg Area High School, and also a member of our school's history club. I am delighted to both share and host the newest project of our club, the Panther Pod, which will consist of history and social studies related talks with some special guests. In this first series, I will be talking to many familiar faces that you see here at Bloomsburg. I thought it would make the most sense to speak to our very own social studies teachers and branch out from there. Initially, I was unsure what to ask or what topics and themes to discuss, but I thought it would be practical to ask why they got into teaching the subject that they did and what they like most about their fields. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. I know that I am especially excited about this series and the Panther Pod overall. I think this would be a great way to showcase interesting topics with interesting people that can better connect us here at Bloomsburg. Make sure to like, follow, comment on, and share this video. And if you have any ideas, suggestions, or feedback, please send us an email. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching.
Continue to follow breaking news tonight. Police are in pursuit of a dark blue two-door coupe on the westbound 405. Authorities have identified the driver as 26-year-old Alexander Bracey. He refused to pull over for a traffic stop.
Good afternoon, Doc. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Dr. Harris.
Pleasure to meet you, Alex. Thank you for having me.
Of course. You know, you are the first here, so it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you.
I've been wanting to meet you since freshman year.
Well, I appreciate that.
Of course.
I've heard a lot of great things about you as well.
How? From who?
Well, the fact that you don the Panther outfit and whatnot.
Whoa.
You've already, your reputation precedes you, so I think it was just a matter of time before our paths would cross.
I'm glad it's through this great project as well.
I agree.
All right. Do you want to get into the questions?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Why did you want to become a teacher?
I think I always had an interest in learning, and I also felt that I had maybe a talent with explaining things, articulating my ideas. I always felt as though I was good at that. So I guess it was just the natural course of things that I would eventually become a teacher in some capacity. And so here I am.
And then following up with that, why did you have an interest in history and social studies?
That was always my first love. I think from as a young child, I always liked old stuff. Probably it was first antiques.
Yeah.
That maybe my grandparents had or something along those lines. But then in school, I think I remember some of my fondest memories are of learning about ancient cultures like ancient Egypt and Rome and things like that. And I think that really made an impression on me, and it really I guess ignited some sort of fire in me, and I just always had a passion for that. So then that took me to my first undergraduate degree was in anthropology, and I had originally wanted to be an archaeologist in Latin America.
Yeah.
So, but that's another story. But, so that's kind of the beginnings of it. I think from a very young age, I had been interested in those kinds of things.
I think that's kind of the same route with me. 7th grade, I learned about ancient Egypt, the Peloponnesian War, ancient Mesopotamia.
Okay.
And Mesopotamia has always been my favorite.
So you like that?
Yeah, I love Hammurabi.
Oh, okay.
Hammurabi's
Awesome.
my guy.
Yeah.
And then going into that, what's your favorite thing about history? What's your favorite topic?
My favorite period, well, probably I studied more, I would say, early medieval stuff. So nowadays they call that the migration period. But all those so-called Germanic groups like the Franks and the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths and the Huns and all that, and Europe was politically very chaotic, but lots of people moving around.
It still is.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. But just a lot of political instability, and I guess at the end of the day, groups of people trying to find, a permanent place to settle down and call home. But I always found that particular period fascinated me the most.
I think with that, mine would go back again to like Mesopotamia,
Right.
and then one of my favorite things about history was always like religion. I loved like studying like ancient religion, even like modern day religion. It's just always like I've just always really liked that part of history. Not like I liked learning about the religion, but like what they believed in that religion. So like theology was always like interesting, like very interesting in my opinion.
Yeah. I think it's an important component of any historical period. I mean, to know or to understand it well, you have to almost get into the total worldview of the culture that you're studying. And so, yeah, I could definitely see that. I myself, I often wonder. In my class, I show students some ancient coins that I have, and featured on them are gods.
Yeah.
I think the last one I showed them, the Mercury, was on the face of the coin, and I thought to myself, isn't it remarkable that people actually thought at one time, that this was a real god, and you could pray to Mercury, maybe he'll answer your prayers, but trying to you're saying, trying to get into that mindset of the era. Oh, absolutely. I think it's a necessary thing to do.
I feel like a lot of people still have some of that religion outlook today. Like I feel like the interesting part is that we might think that these religions are ancient, but I feel like today, even though like they studied that way back when, I feel like some people would still follow like the old beliefs.
It's possible. Yeah.
Maybe it's just a misconception. Speaking of misconception, what do you think your biggest misconception in history is?
You mean as far as like I've heard someone else express?
Like, just what do you think, like, while you're like learning about something, like you think, wow, that happened, and then you learn more about it and you get more into it, and then you go, wait, that's kind of like, that never happened. And like, that's a myth.
So a later discovery that I had actually
that like some people still believe like today.
Well, this is a real thing, and I actually had a close friend of mine say this to me once, and I was sort of astounded by it. And I'm totally discounting, matters of faith. It really has nothing to do with that. But I was, like I said, I was telling a good friend of mine who incidentally has a background in history himself. He was going to be a history teacher, but then he ended up doing something else. So generally he's pretty knowledgeable, but he said something I couldn't believe it. I had told him that, part of the course that I teach has to do with the Christian movement, the beginnings of it. And he said, he says, how do you teach that? And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, I talk about, the movement as it was founded by Jesus of Nazareth and all that. And he says, but he didn't really exist. It's a myth. And I said, Jamie, wait a second here. I said, we could say beyond a reasonable doubt. I said, Jesus of Nazareth, the person, did exist. I said, whether you believe that, he was the Messiah is a completely different matter. I said, but there was a real person. I said, but I said, if you don't want to believe the theological aspect of his life, I said, that's fine, everybody, has a right to, but that was probably one of them. I said, well, I wonder where, and that probably stems from he's just not a religious person.
Yeah.
So,
because I didn't even know that, like, Jesus of Nazareth was like...
Oh, I mean, yeah, there's no
like
doubt.
a real guy.
Yeah, there was no doubt. I mean, I guess the issue arises when the historical figure is associated with the
Bible,
Messiah, the Son of God, and then, and again, that's the theological side of things. But yeah, definitely the person, there are multiple ancient sources that, document his life. So, I would say that's probably the most the misconception that stood out for me the most over the course of my career. But I guess, it's just one of those things. I don't think he ever had the chance to sit down and actually study ancient history. So, I'd say probably the lack of study is probably the worst thing that somebody could do. And then after that, formulate opinions based on relatively little or no knowledge.
Yeah.
So.
And following up on the study and the lack of study, if
Right.
you had to give advice to someone that was studying history, like a student, what advice would you give them?
Well, I'd say, be open-minded. I wouldn't go into anything, with any sort of preconceived ideas. I remember there were instances, again, my course is mainly ancient stuff, but some students were really surprised that, and that they have studied very little ancient history, they were surprised that to find that some of the things that were done in antiquity, we do today, that they thought that these were modern practices.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say go into things with an open mind, and I'd say if you're open-minded, then you're more apt to take something from that, rather than if you've already made up your mind about something, then you're probably not going to gain much, I'd say. So, but also, explore topics that you find interesting, within that scope of, or that span of history that you're studying. So I think in any course there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
Where you could, as they say, where you could find your voice, maybe.
Why would you say history is important? Why do you think it's important?
All right. Recently, I came across a quote from an American author. I think he's long since dead, but he was, I think, maybe in the second half of the 20th century. Mr. Burrell might know. William Faulkner. He had a famous quote, and I said, "Boy, isn't that something?" And it's short and sweet, but boy, it says it all. He said something to the effect, or I think it was in one of his novels. The past is never dead. It's not even past. That is to say, we as a culture tend to view things, we separate things that are before us and the present and perhaps the future. I don't think a lot of people realize, the past constitutes a significant component of the fabric of the present. How could it not?
Yeah.
Our present is definitely driven by the things that came before us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are, for better or for worse. But yeah, it's just it's alive everywhere. You just have to look for it.
I think that quote really is fantastic. I feel like it.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, of course, I can't take credit for it. That's Faulkner's words, but yeah, it's good. It's good.
What was throughout your times teaching? What was the weirdest history project you've gotten?
I don't know about weirdest. There probably were some unusual ones, but again, I encourage students to explore things that interest them. Offhand, I can't really think. Probably there are some less common projects, but again, I think there was at one point somebody was interested in fashion in the Middle Ages or what.
They had some good fashion back in the day.
But I mean, I wouldn't say that was unusual. It was different. Most people are.
That's one of my favorite things. It's just fashion across history.
Okay, that's fine, and I think that's a valid thing to be interested in. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. I can't offhand now really remember anything that stood out as being strange.
Mm-hmm. If you can't think of a weird project, what is probably the stupidest question you've ever been asked about history?
again, I don't know. I don't really think. I don't think any questions are
Well,
you know.
that's not true. There are stupid questions.
I mean, maybe. I don't think I've ever been posed any, I think is the problem. Like, not any that I would say, now, why are you asking me to, if it's something that they should already know? No, I don't think. I think if anything, what my experience has been, and again, I only teach one course. I think more often what I find is people are hesitant to ask questions because they don't want to be perceived as not knowing,
Yeah.
or that it might be a silly question. But maybe I would prefer to hear the so-called silly questions, right? But it's been my experience, like I said, that more often than not, they just won't ask, And
I think a big part of that is because your course, it's like ancient history, and not a lot of people would know about that. But like in the opposite side of that, where it would be like a world cultures, where you like learn about like World War II, like everyone knows about World War II, or when American history, all of those things that happen, like a lot of people already know about that because like of the American education system. A lot of them just kind of like tone ancient history out and focus more on like American history. Me, however, I went to Berwick for middle school, and I learned about ancient history and like ancient world history. Like, so I already had the knowledge about that.
No, and I think you're right. The way you describe it is typically, in fact, and I just learned this recently. They're actually removing Western Civ, like this course that's offered that we.
They're removing it?
They've removed it from a lot of universities. It's not a typical offering anymore because they want to focus on other things that were sort of, putting, Western history or especially the ancient stuff or the less relevant stuff.
I feel like all history is relevant.
Well, I agree, but I guess, certain things take precedence. But yeah, from what I understand, there are more and more universities today that are removing that particular course sequence from their curriculum. So I don't think it's a good idea. But I'm not the one to decide that.
With them, with the universities removing like different topics and stuff, is there any things that you specifically like in your history course like you don't like to teach? Either it's like personal, professional, or like political beliefs that you don't like teaching about because of those reasons?
I would say this. It's a sensitive issue in our history, in our own history. I don't really like, although it's a necessary evil, if you will. I have to mention it at least briefly. Slavery, was a practice in the ancient world. There was a question that came up a couple years ago, and there was a student who was surprised to learn that they practiced slavery in the ancient world. And I said, well, yeah. I said, this isn't a modern phenomenon. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years.
A lot of it was based more on the class system than race. America is the one who really brought like the racial slavery into the.
But it's not something that I really enjoy teaching.
Yeah.
Because it's a very sensitive issue, especially in our history. So I just basically mention what I have to mention, but I don't go into
skim over it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I'll give you an example. A lot of people are surprised to learn that the great Athenians, for as wonderful as they were for advancing the idea of democracy, actually, probably among all the ancient Greek city-states, probably had more slaves than anybody else. It basically, contradicts or it undermines the mission that they were striving for. They want equality for some, but
for the better class, they wanted equality.
Yeah, absolutely. So but I sort of have to give Athens in that instance a much lower grade than what it historically has been given because of that. I said yeah, it's great that they're advancing democratic ideas, but I said they're engaging in an immoral activity, you know. And I said, you know, it goes against human nature, you know, and it's just the wrong thing to do. But you know, and a lot of people, you know, aren't aware of that. So, but yeah, it's not something that I really enjoy teaching, but it is
necessary.
So.
What was one of the best history project you've received over the year? Can you think of one off the top of your head, or is it the same boat with the other ones?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I haven't had students do. The problem is I have to cover so much material within a
shorter
semester, and so I don't. I used to years ago. I used to have the students work on a short paper at the end of the course, but. I mean, there were many good projects. One right now doesn't stand out to me. There were a lot of them. But like I said, I think, you know, the best projects are always come from a person who is pursuing his or her interests. What he or she is.
Not just trying to please you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Who's actually like experimenting and going out of their way to find what they like in the topic that you're teaching, and then base their project off of that.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And again, like I remember, there were students who were really interested in this or that, and they pursued that, and you know, I said, yeah, this is really good, and you know, but again, you know, if you're interested in something, you're gonna seek more information, like you said. So,
if you could teach one like course or like special elective all year, what would it be? Like if you can choose.
That one that I teach.
Western Civ?
Yeah, the exact same one that I do. Actually, I wish I could do it all day if I could, but I have other responsibilities, and there are only so many students, you know, enrolled. But yeah, if I could, I just, well, I'm a long-winded, you know, I'm a talker, so yeah, I could go on and on about something for forever, basically. So
you would choose Western Civ?
I think so. Yeah, I enjoy that. It has enough breadth that it keeps me interested, and then there are certain specific topics that I really like, but the breadth of that course, I do like going through. You know, it's about 4,000 years that's covered. So,
if you could change one thing about history, what would you change?
You know what would be really interesting? Somebody told me, again, this same friend of mine who asked me that question about Jesus of Nazareth, said that he didn't actually buy the book, but he said this. He said he happened to be at a bookstore years ago. This is when the bookstores were still a thing. I mean, they still are, but... And he said he was perusing the books, the newly released books, and he said he picked up this historical novel, and it was this, and I thought, wouldn't that be interesting to see? John F. Kennedy was never assassinated, and the Germans won the Second World War, and Hitler has remained in power all the way up until the early 60s during Kennedy's administration. So now there's a showdown between those two figures. But he said it was an interesting, you know,
plot.
Yeah. And he said he never bought it, but maybe I wonder what the course of history would have been like had John F. Kennedy not been assassinated.
And the Nazis won?
No,
or just
I was
JFK?
more interested. I was more interested to wonder about, you know, what it would be, what our country and maybe the world would have been like had he lived.
What would be your, like, you're talking about how, like, you're very interested in JFK. Would he be your favorite president? Do you have a favorite president?
I'd say he probably, yeah. He seems, again, it was before my time. He seems, from what the footage I've seen of him, he seems to have been a really, really inspirational figure. In fact, my mother told me an interesting story. While he was, I want to say, he may have been trying to get the Democratic nomination for 1960, he made a stop in Hazleton, my hometown,
Yeah.
and my mother was just a teenager. And they had this huge stage put up in the middle of the downtown, and I don't know how many thousands of people were there, but she had the chance, she shook his hand. And I said, boy, you know, I don't know of too many people who could say that. But yeah, he just seemed like it was a great time in our country's history. There was just a lot of reasons to be
Proud.
Yeah, and just it must have been a really exciting time.
Can't say that nowadays.
Yeah, it's just we're far too divided. So yeah, but I'd say probably again it was before my time. But yeah, Kennedy seems to be one of those very inspirational figures of recent history,
Yeah.
you know.
Staying with the topic of favorites, do you have like a favorite history movie that you enjoy?
I'm trying to think here.
I don't even think I know that many history movies.
Yeah, I mean, I
Like 300?
Yeah, you know what? I've never even really. I've watched segments of that. Yeah. Let me think here. What else? You know what was done pretty well, and I do show some clips of it, or on Grease. That Troy movie that came out in '04 with Brad Pitt.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think I watched that with my grandma.
Yeah, that's actually pretty well done. It's I would say fairly historically accurate. Yeah, I think that one in terms of a Hollywood production, I think that one is pretty well done. Some others I don't know so much, but yeah, I like that one.
Do you have like a message for those interested in studying history?
I would just say, take a class. You never know what you can get from it. Be open-minded, and like I said before, pursue what interests you. And if it's, you want to get something specific out of a particular area or period, like I said, I think every period or geographical area has something for everybody. So that's what I would say. Lastly, do you have a favorite historical quote?
Well, I already said the one about Faulkner.
Yeah.
From like a historical figure.
From a historical figure. Probably I still don't fully understand it. I have continually tried to make sense of this. There was a figure in ancient Athens who we get the adjective draconian or severe from his name, but his name was Draco or Dracon. But he apparently put forth a law code, and now in that law code we get the precedent for we have basically from them we gained the idea initially of there are two different types of homicide. There's one that was caused with intent, and then there's one that was caused accidentally. Obviously, we've expanded that definition considerably, but despite those that differentiation of the different types of that crime, regardless, he said most crimes deserve the death penalty. Reason being, we don't want to give the people an impression that they could get off light, something to that effect. So it was really bizarre, but that's where we get draconian. You're being
I think it kind of
harsh.
makes sense though.
But you're going to give the death penalty for most things because there's no lesser penalty or yeah, I don't know. I don't really understand it, but it must have been sort of a scary time to be in Athens, to say the least.
When Draco was
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say that's probably around the seventh century, somewhere around BC, somewhere around there. So, but anyway, yeah, I can't think of. I don't use too many quotes, but that it was something to that effect.
That's a good one. I've never heard of him or any of his quotes, and that was a good quote.
Yeah, again, I'm not quoting it word for word, but it's something along those lines.
Did you prepare a dance?
No, I didn't.
Just make one up on the fly.
Yeah, considering that I'm sort of incapacitated, but
It was a pleasure.
It was
Thank
a pleasure,
you.
Alex. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Well, good luck with the rest of your
Thank you.
interviews.
I'll try.
I'm glad. I'm honored to be the first.
Well, I'm
Many.
honored that you are the first.
Well, thank you.
Of course.
All right, time to bake a cake. We're in my kitchen now, and these are the basics you'll need. 2 eggs, equal parts sugar, plain flour and soft butter, a splash of milk, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Crack the eggs into a mixing bowl. Add the sugar and butter and